hawine gai na wiahia.
Home to the Seneca Nation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and many others who settled here, Geneva, New York has always been diverse. The early settlers were mostly English, Scottish, and Dutch. With the industrialization of Western New York throughout the 19th century, successive waves of immigrants came who were of German, Irish, and Italian descent. Many of them came in search of work through nearby cities like Buffalo, but their presence was not always welcomed. This was the case with the Irish who came in the 1820s and settled on Water Street, which is now Exchange Street.
Geneva is kind of an illustration of what was happening nationally. Nationally, there was a lot of anti-Irish, but also particularly anti-Catholic sentiment. So they were not welcomed as English speakers or members of the British Empire. They were kind of the other. So I think that had to do with where they settled. South Main Street was the wealthiest street in Geneva. It was also had the best location. It was high up on the hill with a great view, but also the freshest air. Down here on Water Street and closer to the lake, it was kind of swampy, and it was just considered not as good real estate. So if you look at a map of where immigrants, when they first came to Geneva, before they assimilated, where they settled was usually about as far from South Main Street as they could go.
Following the Irish, a large wave of Italian immigration happened around 1896.
That was around the time that the city was doing, at the time it was still a village, but the village was putting in municipal sewer lines. So that was a lot of hard manual labor, digging through the street and laying the pipes and whatnot. And they brought in a large group of Italians from out of town to do that work.
On June 29, 1897, the weekly newspaper, the Geneva Advertiser, reported a large gang of Italians arrived here Tuesday night to go to work for the canning factory in picking peas, it is said. It is probable that the bringing of scores of Italian laborers here from Buffalo under the Padrone system will lead to trouble in the long run.
The newspaper tended to be pretty biased. It was a very anti-Italian, and in many ways they spoke of stereotypes and spoke of Italians in the same way that 70 or 80 years later that some of the media were talking about Latino and Mexican immigrants who came here to do farm work. So there were a lot of stereotypes about violence and not being civil and things like that.
But the community was resilient. They opened shops and restaurants, and through hard work and mutual aid, they thrived. In the next 100 years, the Italians would become an integral part of Geneva's economy and the city today. Being close to Canada and a center of abolitionist movements, Geneva became a destination for African Americans who were former slaves on farms in nearby counties and those who were fugitives from the South. By the 1860s, with a population of more than 600 African Americans, Ontario County had the largest Black population in Western New York. This is also when schools in Geneva became desegregated. Geneva's African American community grew after World War II. Migrant workers came from the South and settled for farm and service jobs. The annual Martin Luther King Day March is a celebration of their histories. This parking lot, known to most residents today as the site of the Geneva Farmers Market, used to be where many Syrian immigrants lived. By 1915, they built St. Michael's Syrian Orthodox Church until they moved to a new church in 1961. While the diversity of downtown business is a testament to Geneva's diversity, the parking lots and demolished buildings are also reminders of just how much has changed over the years. The city streets and alleys in today's downtown are conduits to both the past and the future. Let's take a good look at them. One leading to another, only to be intercepted by yet another way to get to where we're going. In the words of urban scholar Jane Jacobs, the trust of a city street is formed over time from many, many little public sidewalk contracts. It grows out of people stopping at the bar for a beer, getting advice from the grocer, and giving advice to the newsstand man, comparing opinions with other customers at the bakery. Most of it is ostensibly trivial, but the sum is not trivial at all. The same can be said about our diverse neighbors, seemingly distinct and disparate, but linked by a vital force that connects us all. In 1898, the nation and Geneva were recovering from the devastating panic of 1893 to 1897. It was the worst depression ever in the United States until the worldwide depression of 1929. Foreign investors no longer wanted American cash. They sold their American investments and demanded payment in gold. Gold flowed out of the American treasury. By February 1895, the United States was within days of having no gold left in the Treasury. The United States would be insolvent and unable to pay its debts. Faced with a Congress that refused to act, President Grover Cleveland turned to the private sector. Enter J.P. Morgan.
J.P. Morgan was an owner of an investment bank, the largest investment bank in the United States. And what investment banks do is they raise money for entities, corporations or governments, state governments, through bond issues or stock issues. J.P. Morgan put together a consortium of investment banks, including the Rothschilds in Europe, who were willing to hold and sell treasury bonds for the United States. And that meant that they were going to give the United States the gold, and then the United States would pay them interest. And they did that because they were confident that the U.S. government would be able to pay it. But that confidence was going to be built on the power of private investment banks that were willing to do this kind of lending, which would be the same place businesses would go if they needed to borrow. So you could see that this would sort of tie together investment banking, commercial banking, and manufacturing, transportation sectors, commodities all together. And the center of that was going to be the money center banks in New York City, dominated by J.P. Morgan.
In 1896, Grover Cleveland passed the keys of the Treasury to the newly elected William McKinley. Cleveland could truthfully boast that he saved the nation from insolvency, although on terms highly profitable for the J.P. Morgan Group. The economic depression ended in 1897, and in 1898, Geneva became a city and faced the future with economic optimism. "125 years later, Geneva is recovering from another devastating impact on the economy, COVID and its aftermath. How have local business owners weathered the storm?
At first, we limited the amount of people that could be in the store to 10, and then it was 5, and then it was 3, and then it was 1. And then we pretty much locked the doors, and we just passed orders out the door as numbers got worse here in our area. And that's how we did it, one day at a time, one order at a time, and people were extremely gracious. And the people in this area were very supportive of the idea. They showed up and they supported us. And so when people ask how we got through COVID, yes, we did certain policy changes, but it was really the community that just decided that they wanted us to be around.
It was really a hard hit and everybody was scared. There was many times where, we wouldn't get a single order the whole day. We would sit there and it's like you just staring, watching paint dry on the wall. And slowly, with persistence and getting our name out there and letting people know that we'll bring it out to your car, we'll put it in your trunk, we'll, as contactless as possible, get you your meal, credit card over the phone, whatever was necessary, and built it from there.
Water Street Cafe is a staple in the community, and it's become more and more so over the last 3 years that James has owned it. It's our regular customers that come in every day, especially our senior citizen population. Sometimes we're their only point of contact for the whole community for the day. And when they don't show up, we call. I have a little card box like your grandmother would have, like would keep her recipes on. And I had them fill it out very, very early on with their information, even with one of their sons or daughters' cell phone number on it, just in case. We've done last minute deliveries for senior citizens that, I just can't get out of my driveway, it's not shoveled today, or, and we still make sure that they get their raisin toast and coffee and scrambled eggs or whatever.
Just know we'll send it right over to you.
Yeah. We received a contact from the Armory very quickly, as soon as COVID had started, for about 2 lunches for 2 gentlemen that were going to be stationed there for a while. And they were every day, they come in, pick up their lunches, say hello, go. Eventually, as the state of emergency grew, especially here in New York State, and more men and women were stationed here, they built a warehouse. And they helped the distribution of the vaccine throughout the state. And then our contract grew, and it was 7, and then it became 70 during the crisis with the nursing home population here and them not having enough employees. And during those heavy times, James was going in at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning to start all of the 100 pounds of potatoes that needed to be cooked on the grill and all the scrambled eggs and bacon. And it was definitely an organized effort to make sure, even on the holidays when we were closed, to make sure the military was fed.
Genevans struggled through the panic of 1893, the COVID crisis and its aftermath, and emerged from them with characteristic resilience and determination. By 1898, Geneva was widely known for its flourishing nursery industry. There were 30 businesses growing flowers, shrubbery, and trees on 8,000 acres. What are now Maxwell Avenue, Castle Street, and Nursery Street had long greenhouses and carefully laid out beds. R.G. Chase Nurseries had a large packing shed on Pulteney Street. The most notable of these successful nursery owners was William Smith. By 1898, the nursery was very prosperous. In 1883, he organized the Standard Optical Company and was director of the First National Bank in Geneva. He built the Smith Observatory on the land behind his mansion, now the William Smith Inn, on 600 Castle Street. In 1894, he built the Smith Opera House and, among other events, encouraged suffragists to hold meetings there. They inspired him to endow William Smith College. It offered a non-denominational liberal arts education for women, which was very unusual for its day. The era of the large nurseries has passed, but Geneva still benefits from the fertile soil and microclimate provided by Seneca Lake. The development of the wine industry in the area has sparked a renaissance in restaurants in Geneva that features wines grown in the vicinity of Geneva.
Most of the greatest wine regions in the world are defined by that razor's edge of whether it's possible or impossible. And most of kind of the non-European production of wine has oftentimes gravitated towards, in many cases, easier places for viticulture and for growing. But if we look at a lot of the traditional wine regions and a lot of the classic European wine regions, so many of them are on this precise level of if something wasn't perfect or just in that spot, it wouldn't be possible to grow grapes here. And that for me is what makes this region so special is, as we sit here and look out at this beautiful, amazing body of water, if it weren't for that, it would be impossible to grow fruit here. If it weren't for Lake Ontario just north of us here, it would be impossible to grow Vitis vinifera here. If you think about what that wine lives through, that's all comes through in the way it smells, the way it looks, the way it tastes. That vine not only has its species and its kind of genetic data made up from where it came from and what its parents were and all of those things, but it tunnels through meters and meters and meters of our soils that talk about the hundreds of thousands of years of glacial movement and tectonic movement, and then prior to that, the sedimentation that happened that created all the shales that we're based on here. Those vines dig through all of that. They touch that. They take their nutrient from that, and that comes up and comes through in the wine.
Throughout its 125-year history, Geneva has been blessed with a diverse population. Its people have shown resilience and ingenuity in the face of adversity. The region is blessed with a land that always bears rich fruit. We celebrate Geneva's history tonight in the Smith Opera House. Exactly 125 years ago, John Philip Sousa performed here. In 1897, Sousa composed Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's end with well-known lyrics some wit wrote to his stirring march. You probably know them. Be kind to your web-footed friends. Are you ready to sing along? Here we go.
Be kind to your web-footed friends, for a duck may be somebody's mother. Be kind to your friends in the swamp, where the weather is very, very tough. Now you may think that this is the end. Well, it is. Thank you.